How many times have you stood in the pasta aisle at Walmart or Target, grabbed that iconic green plastic shaker, and thought you were buying actual food? You shake it over your spaghetti, it smells vaguely salty, it coats the carbs, and you move on with your life. But what if I told you that the powdery white stuff you've been dusting over your family's dinner for years isn't just cheap cheese? What if the secret ingredient keeping that powder from clumping together is the exact same substance used to manufacture cardboard boxes and drywall? You think your stomach is digesting dairy, but your gut is actually trying to process literal wood pulp. It's a reality that sounds like a conspiracy theory, but it's sitting right now in millions of American refrigerators. Tonight, we are completely pulling back the curtain on the multi-million-dollar American Parmesan cheese scam. By the time we finish this teardown, you're going to know exactly how the industrial dairy complex systematically manipulates federal loopholes to sell you garbage fillers at premium prices. I'm going to show you the precise laboratory data that expose the biggest brands in the country. Will break down the specific chemical preservatives hiding behind innocent-sounding labels, and you'll discover how a massive corporate fraud operation operated right under the nose of the federal government for years. Most importantly, near the very end of this investigation, I am going to reveal a jaw-dropping price paradox, an authentic, imported, globally protected cheese that actually costs less per ounce than the synthetic dust you've been buying. You'll walk away from this video knowing more about dairy chemistry than 90% of the grocery store managers stocking those shelves. To understand how deep this deception goes, we need an educational foundation because the dairy industry thrives on your ignorance. Let's look at how real Parmesan is supposed to be built versus how the industrial machine manufactures it. Think of authentic cheese like a finely tuned vintage muscle car. To build it, you need incredibly specific, high-grade raw materials and an immense amount of time. In Italy, the name Parmigiano Reggiano isn't just a label. It's a legally protected designation of origin. By law, it can only be made in 5 tiny provinces. The cows can only eat local grass or hay. No silage, no fermented feed, no exceptions. The entire ingredient list consists of exactly 3 things: raw, unpasteurized milk, salt, and natural calf rennet. That's it. Then the magic happens through time. The cheese must age on wooden shelves for a minimum of 12 months and up to 3 years. As it ages, moisture slowly evaporates, concentrating the proteins and fats, creating those tiny, crunchy, savory crystals that explode with flavor. It is a slow, expensive, completely natural transformation. Now let's look at how the American industrial food system builds its version, which is more like a cheap plastic toy rolling off a factory assembly line. Instead of using whole raw milk rich in natural fats, American industrial processors use pasteurized part-skim milk. Why? Because the fat is the most valuable part of the milk. They skim it off to sell separately for butter or cream, leaving behind a watery, nutrient-stripped byproduct for the cheese. Because they use dead, pasteurized milk, they lose all the complex native bacteria that create flavor during aging. To fix this, they inject factory-grown chemical cultures and synthetic enzymes to force a fast mimicry of fermentation. They completely skip the expensive 12 to 36-month aging process because time is money, and letting wheels sit in a climate-controlled warehouse for a year kills quarterly corporate profit margins. But when you skip the aging process, you encounter a massive structural problem. Young, unaged cheese is full of water. If you grate young, wet cheese and stick it in a plastic tube, it will turn into a soggy, moldy, disgusting clump of dairy paste within 48 hours. So how does the industry solve this? They introduce anti-caking agents. The primary weapon of choice is powdered cellulose. Let's be completely clear about what powdered cellulose is. It is literally chemically micro-refined wood pulp. It's the exact same structural fiber extracted from pine trees and cotton plants. The industry sprays this dry, absorbent wood fiber over the wet, synthetic cheese shreds so they don't stick together. It acts like thousands of tiny, microscopic sponges, sucking up the excess moisture so the product pours smoothly out of the shaker. Every single time you tilt that canister, you are pouring engineered forestry byproducts directly onto your food. Every mini revelation in the ingredient list points to a system designed to optimize corporate cash flow at the expense of human digestion. And the deeper you dig into the actual brands, the nastier it gets. Let's dive straight into the absolute worst offenders sitting on American grocery store shelves right now. Starting with the household names you need to start walking past immediately. We will begin with the least shocking and build up to the most egregious corporate deceptions. First up is the granddaddy of the grocery aisle, Kraft grated Parmesan cheese. This iconic green canister is a fixture in American households, sitting on kitchen counters from coast to coast. Kraft Heinz has spent decades building an image of wholesome, reliable, family-friendly nutrition. People trust it because it's familiar. But if you actually flip that green tube around and look at the fine print, the illusion shatters. The ingredient deck starts with Parmesan cheese, but immediately breaks into a parenthetical confession. Part skim milk, cheese culture, salt, enzymes, followed by cellulose powder and potassium sorbate. Part skim milk is your very first warning sign. Real, traditional Parmesan relies on the rich fat content of whole milk to develop its deep flavor profile. Kraft strips that fat out at the very beginning because part skim dairy is drastically cheaper to process in massive industrial vats. But the real kicker came when Bloomberg News commissioned independent laboratory testing on major store brands. Kraft's green canister tested positive for 3.8% cellulose. Now, the dairy industry tries to claim that a 2 to 4% range of wood pulp is a totally normal, acceptable standard to keep things flowing. But ask yourself this: why is there any refined wood fiber at all in a product that boldly claims 100% grated Parmesan on the front of the label? The front screams pure dairy. The lab report screams industrial filler. Texture-wise, you know exactly what this feels like. It has the consistency of dry, gritty sand, lacking any of the rich, buttery melting quality of real cheese. At around $4 to $5 for an 8-ounce shaker, you are paying a massive premium for engineered forestry leftovers disguised as cheese. It's not a kitchen staple. It's a brilliant marketing scam designed to sell you cheap, defatted dairy waste and wood dust under the guise of an Italian tradition. If you think Kraft is bad, the corporate race to the bottom drops even lower when you look at supermarket private labels, leading us directly to our next offender. Great Value Grated Parmesan, the omnipresent store brand at Walmart. Walmart's entire business model is built on offering the lowest price possible. And to achieve that, their suppliers have to cut every imaginable corner. Consumers buy it because it's a couple of dollars cheaper than the name brands, assuming it's the exact same cheese, just packaged without the fancy logo. It's an absolute trap. In that same explosive Bloomberg laboratory investigation, Great Value Grated Parmesan didn't just hover near the industry's self-appointed safety margin, it completely blew past it, clocking in at a staggering close 7.8% cellulose content. That means nearly 1 out of every 12 spoonfuls you shake onto your plate isn't even a dairy byproduct. It is pure anti-caking wood filler. Eating this is the culinary equivalent of seasoning your dinner with a handful of fine sawdust from a local lumber yard. It feels powdery, chalky on the tongue, and completely robs your food of any actual richness. But the physical composition isn't even the most damning part of Walmart's private label history. Great Value's Parmesan supplier was unmasked as Castle Cheese Incorporated, a massive manufacturer operating out of Slippery Rock, Pennsylvania. A sweeping federal investigation revealed that the president of Castle Cheese, Michelle Murder, was orchestrating a massive systematic fraud campaign. They weren't just pumping the canisters full of wood pulp. They were actively cutting the product with cheap, low-grade substitutes like Swiss, mozzarella, and white cheddar, while slapping a 100% Parmesan label on the front. Murder eventually pleaded guilty in federal court to criminal charges of introducing misbranded and adulterated food into interstate commerce. The company collapsed into bankruptcy, but the systemic loophole remains wide open. Walmart simply found new suppliers to fill the gap, and the product sits on the shelves today, continuing to use the same legal gray areas to optimize their corporate margins. It is a certified legal fiction masquerading as food. If you already feel like checking your own refrigerator shelf to see what you've been feeding your family, hit that subscribe button right now, because the deeper we go down this rabbit hole, the more toxic the industrial shortcuts become. Our next stop is Essential Everyday Grated Parmesan, a massive private label brand found across hundreds of regional supermarket chains across the United States. Just like Walmart, this brand aimed for maximum volume and lowest cost, and they sourced their product from the exact same criminal operation at Castle Cheese Incorporated. When laboratory technicians ran the numbers on Essential every day, the results hit the highest level of contamination recorded in the entire federal investigation. A mind-boggling 8.8% cellulose content. Nearly 10% of the entire plastic container was refined tree fiber. This wasn't a minor calibration error or a bad batch. This was a calculated, deliberate corporate strategy to inflate profit margins by replacing real food with cheap industrial waste. When you sprinkle this product, it doesn't melt. It clumps into a strange, gummy paste because the massive concentration of wood fiber absorbs all the moisture and grease, leaving behind a chalky, synthetic residue that tastes like salt and chemicals rather than aged dairy. This was the exact product that finally forced the Food and Drug Administration to step in and launch a formal criminal inquiry. It took a federal prosecution to prove that 100% grated cheese was an outright lie. Yet the regulatory loopholes remain so weak that you can still buy practically identical formulations under different corporate umbrellas today. But let's move away from the shaker canisters and look at the cheese wall, because the deception isn't limited to plastic tubes. Enter the Stella Parmesan wedge. Stella markets itself as a premium, authentic domestic artisan cheese. The packaging looks sophisticated, featuring old-world fonts and elegant branding, and it commands a much higher price point per pound at your local Kroger or Safeway. You buy a wedge thinking you're graduating to real, high-quality cooking, but turn that plastic wedge over and read the fine print. Stella is owned by Saputo Incorporated, one of the single largest, most aggressive multinational dairy conglomerates on the planet. To maximize production speeds, Stella uses pasteurized part-skim milk instead of raw whole milk, completely eliminating the natural bacterial profile. Then, they cut the aging process down to just 10 months, 2 full months short of even the absolute bare minimum required for a real Parmesan flavor profile. Because the cheese is rushed out of the factory without proper aging, it never develops its own hard, protective, natural rind. To stop the premature wedge from rotting or growing mold on the supermarket shelf, Saputo injects it with natamycin. Let's identify exactly what natamycin is. It's an antifungal antibiotic prescription agent used in industrial food production as a chemical mold inhibitor. This substance is strictly outlawed in authentic traditional cheesemaking because a properly aged cheese protects itself naturally through moisture loss and rind development. Stella relies on chemical warfare to simulate shelf stability because their industrial process doesn't allow the cheese to grow up naturally. You are paying a premium artisan price for a rushed, antibiotic-coated factory shortcut. Next, we have to look at another massive supermarket staple, 4C grated Parmesan. 4C tries to position itself as the authentic Italian-American choice, often found in heavy rotation across East Coast grocery networks. But if you look closely at the packaging, 4C employs a classic corporate shell game. They frequently blend their Parmesan with Romano cheese. On the surface, that sounds like a flavor choice, but economically, Romano is significantly cheaper and faster to manufacture at scale. They use this blend to aggressively undercut the cost of production while charging you full price for what you assume is a pure product. The dairy base is the same low-cost pasteurized part-skim milk, heavily bulked out with our old friend powdered cellulose and stabilized with potassium sorbate to give it an unnaturally long shelf life. Independent testing has routinely flagged 4C for filler levels that push right against the absolute limit of consumer tolerance. It's a multi-layered scam. They dilute the primary cheese with a cheaper variety, pad the volume with wood pulp, lock it down with synthetic preservatives, and sell it to you as a premium topping. Finally, we reach the most trusted, most heavily advertised wholesome brand on the market, Sargento Shredded Parmesan. Sargento has built its entire multi-million-dollar corporate identity around three powerful words: real, natural cheese. They run massive television and digital ad campaigns blasting other brands for using processed ingredients, positioning themselves as the pure, honest alternative for American families. But let's look at the actual science of their shredded Parmesan line. While it technically satisfies the bare minimum, loosely written FDA definitions for cheese, the ingredient deck tells a hypocritical story. Pasteurized part-skim milk, powdered cellulose, potato starch, and natamycin. The shredded format itself is the quiet trap that corporate marketers never want to discuss. When you shred cheese into tiny high-surface area pieces, the physical tendency of those pieces is to immediately fuse back together into a solid block. To prevent this from happening during transit in refrigerated trucks, Sargento has to aggressively coat the shreds in an anti-caking cocktail of both powdered cellulose and potato starch. By design, shredded cheese requires a far higher concentration of non-dairy fillers per serving than any block or wedge format. Furthermore, Sargento's product is aged for only a fraction of the traditional timeline, resulting in a severe lack of natural flavor complexity. To compensate for this blandness, they rely heavily on salt and processing tricks. They lecture the consumer about real cheese while coating their product in the exact same wood pulp and antibiotics used by the budget brands. It is a masterclass in corporate gaslighting, proving that a high price and a clean marketing campaign can hide the exact same industrial shortcuts. And now, what it was worth watching all the way through for. We are finally leaving the industrial wasteland of wood pulp, chemical preservatives, and federal court records behind. It is time for the reward, because you do not have to settle for synthetic dust or antibiotic-coated shortcuts. There are brands sitting on the very same supermarket shelves that respect the centuries-old craft of cheese making, deliver pure nutrition, and won't treat your stomach like a garbage disposal. Let's look at the actual good options you can buy right now. Ordered from the most incredibly affordable mainstream value plays to the absolute gold standard premium wedges. Proving that real food can fit any budget, we begin with the ultimate domestic savior of the cheese aisle, Belgioioso Parmesan. Founded in 1979 in Denmark, Wisconsin by Errico Arricchio, this brand represents a magnificent bridge between traditional methods and American availability. Arricchio is a fourth-generation Italian cheesemaker whose family had been crafting traditional cheeses in southern Italy since 1877. He moved to the United States with a singular, clear mission to produce authentic Italian-style cheeses using premium American milk and strict old-world artisan methods. Belgioioso sources fresh, whole milk daily from local family-owned Wisconsin dairy farms. Look at the ingredient label on a wedge of Belgioioso. Cultured milk, salt, and enzymes. That is it. There is no powdered cellulose, no potato starch, no potassium sorbate, and absolutely no natamycin. They age their Parmesan wheels on wooden shelves for over 10 months. Because it is manufactured in Wisconsin, and not the Emilia-Romagna region of Italy, it cannot legally carry the protected designation name of Parmigiano Reggiano. But the process is beautifully transparent. In practice, the difference is night and day compared to the skip list. When you grate a wedge of Belgioioso at home, it doesn't fall into a dry, sandy powder. It creates beautiful, fluffy, buttery ribbons that carry a rich, nutty, sweet flavor profile. It melts perfectly because it isn't choked with wood fiber. Financially, it completely destroys the corporate scam. A 5-ounce wedge retails for roughly 5 to 6 at mainstream supermarkets like Kroger, Target, or Publix. That places it right in line with the pseudo-premium domestic brands, but you are getting 100% real, unadulterated cheese. The only minor downside is that because it lacks synthetic mold inhibitors, you actually have to keep it properly wrapped in parchment paper or plastic in your fridge. But that is a tiny price to pay for genuine food safety. Next, let's talk about the absolute best value play in the entire United States. A product that completely shatters the myth that high-quality food is a luxury reserved for the ultra-wealthy Trader Joe's Parmigiano Reggiano. Trader Joe's has built a massive cult following by cutting out corporate middlemen, buying directly from producers at scale, and passing those savings on the consumer. Their wedge is not a domestic imitation. It is imported directly from the designated provinces of Italy. It carries the official fire-branded Consorzio stamp right on the rind, certifying its absolute authenticity. The ingredients are the sacred trinity: raw cow's milk, salt, and natural calf rennet. Trader Joe's ensures this specific selection is aged for a minimum of 24 months. This is the exact same deeply complex crystalline cheese you would purchase at a high-end European specialty boutique or an artisanal Italian market. The taste is a revelation, sharp, deeply savory, packed with those crunchy glutamate crystals that signify true maturity. It smells of dried fruit and toasted nuts, completely free of the sour, chemical tang of industrial shakers. Now let's break down the math, because this is where the green canister completely loses its economic argument. Trader Joe's prices their 24-month aged imported wedge at approximately $8 for an 8-ounce piece. That is roughly $1 per ounce. When you calculate the cost per serving of a Kraft or Great Value canister, factoring in that you are paying for wood pulp and water, the price difference is mere pennies per ounce. You are getting 800 years of unbroken culinary tradition, zero fillers, and a magnificent flavor density for virtually the same out-of-pocket cost as factory floor sweepings. Finally, we reach the undisputed heavy hitter, the gold standard of supermarket sourcing, Costco's Kirkland signature Parmigiano Reggiano. For the smart consumer who wants the highest possible quality at the absolute lowest unit price, this is the holy grail. Costco partners directly with elite Italian cooperatives to source massive wheels of true Consorzio-certified Parmigiano Reggiano, which are then cut and wrapped under the Kirkland signature label. Like the Trader Joe's option, it features nothing but raw milk, salt, and rennet, aged for a full 24 months. Experts and culinary specialists routinely rate Kirkland's cheese program as one of the best in the world, because Costco uses its massive global purchasing power to enforce strict quality control. The sensory experience here is unparalleled. The cheese is hard, granular, and breaks along natural fractures. It melts into a flawless, golden, lacy disc in a hot pan, demonstrating the perfect emulsion of natural dairy fats and proteins. It is highly concentrated, meaning a tiny microplane dusting delivers more actual flavor punch than half a canister of industrial powder. It is sold in larger random weight wedges, usually averaging around $12 to $15 total, but the price per pound hovers around $12 to $13. That is an absolute steal for a world-class, globally protected artisan product. The downside? You have to buy it in a larger block, and you need a Costco membership to get through the door. But if you use Parmesan regularly, it is an unbeatable investment in real food that elevates every single dish you cook. Now that your eyes are wide open to the multi-million-dollar wood pulp hustle, let's make sure you never get taken for a ride again. When you walk into Walmart, Kroger, or Safeway, you need an airtight strategy to immediately filter the garbage from the real deal. Here are the 6 non-negotiable rules for buying Parmesan in America. First, look exclusively for the phrase Parmigiano Reggiano or the explicit initials DOP on the packaging. The label only says the generic word Parmesan. You are looking at a product legally untethered from any traditional standards of quality. Second, perform the direct ingredient count. It must say exactly 3 ingredients: milk, salt, and rennet. If you see a 4th ingredient, put it back on the shelf. Third, memorize the red flag additive vocabulary. Words like cellulose, potato starch, cornstarch, potassium sorbate, and natriumphosin are corporate confessions of a rushed, low-quality factory shortcut. Fourth, never buy pre-grated or pre-shredded cheese in plastic canisters or bags. The high surface area of shredded cheese requires anti-caking agents by default, meaning you are guaranteed to pay for fillers. Fifth, buy the wedge and grate it at home using a standard microplane or box grater. It takes exactly 30 seconds, saves you money per serving, and keeps wood fiber entirely out of your digestive tract. Sixth, inspect the physical appearance of the wedge. Look for a hard, golden brown, natural rind and visible tiny white speckles within the cheese. Those speckles are tyrosine crystals, the definitive scientific hallmark of an authentically aged premium product. When you zoom out and look at the entire landscape, the reality of the food system becomes crystal clear. The American industrial dairy complex isn't designed to nourish your family. It is mathematically optimized to extract maximum profit by exploiting your trust and abusing federal labeling loopholes. The industry relies entirely on the fact that the average consumer spends less than 5 seconds scanning a front label and almost never turns the container around to investigate the fine print. But once you break that single habit of blind consumerism and shift your thinking toward actual ingredient transparency, their marketing matrix completely collapses. Spending a couple of extra dollars on an 800-year-old imported tradition isn't a food snob luxury. It is a logical, mathematically sound investment in real, honest nutrition that elevates your health and your cooking. Thank you so much for hanging out and digging into the data with me tonight. If you want to protect your friends and family from eating processed pine trees with their pasta, please share this video with them right now. We all know someone who keeps that big green plastic canister permanently stationed on their kitchen counter. I want to hear from you directly down in the comments section below. Go look in your refrigerator right now, flip the container, and tell me exactly which brand